Right, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me this morning, 6th of June, 2026, for the Cambridge Information Meeting. Right, so this is just to let you know a little bit about the Cambridge program and how we implement it here at Somerset College and what it means for our students and what they can do with the Cambridge program and how it's going to work. So I'm going to take you through various pages. You're welcome to ask questions towards the end. As I mentioned, I am going to be recording this. So this is currently recording, and I'll switch the recording off at the end once we open the floor for any questions. Right, so I am going to be admitting some latecomers as we go along, so please do excuse me if I've just got to stop for a second to let them in. Right, so let's get going. Okay, so Somerset College, I know we've got a couple of international people on this meeting at the moment. And so just to let you know, Somerset College is an independent co-educational school based in the winelands of the Western Cape in South Africa. Okay, we're actually an IEB school. And as an IEB school, we offer everything from grade 000 through to matric. Right, so it's from age 4 to age 18 generally. And the Cambridge program that I'm talking to you about today is our Cambridge A-level program, which runs parallel to grade 11 and grade 12. Right, so we are not a full Cambridge school. We are actually an IEB school, and not to be confused with IB, the International Baccalaureate. IEB stands for the Independent Examination Board, so it is a South African curriculum. Right, and then we offer the Cambridge AS and A-level parallel to grade 11 and grade 12. We do have boarding on our property, okay, for both boys and girls. So we are a co-ed school offering boarding for both boys and girls. And people joining the Cambridge program are welcome to apply for boarding as well. Right. Okay, so what is Cambridge International? Okay, so Cambridge International is a curriculum that is offered by Cambridge University, an arm of Cambridge University. It's an international curriculum offered in over 10,000 schools in a large number of countries around the world. Okay, and it's where students work towards achieving their Cambridge International AS and A-level qualification. Now, AS stands for Advanced Subsidiary, and A just stands for Advanced Level. What the A-level is all about is that in the Cambridge program, you can up to age 16, you generally do what is known as the GCSE, or in the international side of it, that would be called an IGCSE. And that generally ends at age 16, and in some countries that is regarded as a school leaving year. And the advanced program, which is then a 2-year advanced level, then is for students who want to go on to university. Right, so specifically geared for students going on to university after school. Because in the UK, for example, you can leave school with a GCSE qualification and go, leave school and go do whatever you want to do after that. But if you want to go into university, you would then do this at advanced level. Right, so at Somerset College, the advanced level qualification is achieved in the same year that a South African student would have achieved their matric certificate. So in other words, in grade 12. In many schools in South Africa, the A-level is regarded as a year 13. And this is what sets Somerset College apart from many other schools in the country, in that our students will get an A-level qualification in the same time that they would have achieved their grade 12. So they don't need to do an extra year. Obviously, it's clear then that it is an accelerated program. Okay, and we just need to talk about that a little bit later. Right, so the Cambridge International A-level qualification is accepted in most countries around the world. I say they're most countries because there are one or two who may have some issues around it, where they generally prefer their own local qualifications, but any of the major countries that people would go to university in would accept Cambridge International A-level. Right, and notice that there are a number of A-level providers. So what is known as this advanced level, one of the biggest ones offered here in South Africa after Cambridge International is the edXL A-level curriculum, offered by Pearson International. We do not do that. We are a Cambridge International school in that regard. So that means that when my students write exams, they're writing exams which are set and marked and assessed by Cambridge International and not by Pearson. Okay, we do not offer the other one. So anybody looking to write Pearson exams, unfortunately, Somerset College is not a Pearson EdXL center. Right, moving on. We've been running since 2015. I started the Cambridge program here at Somerset College in 2015 with 6 students in the AS program. We wrote our first A-level exams in 2016. And in the very first year, we managed to get students coming top in the world in maths and achieving some amazing things. And since then, we've had over 50 students who have achieved top in the world or top in the country awards. And these are just some of the photographs. The bigger photographs that you see on the right-hand side are our students who did really well in the 2025 Cambridge exams. And many of those students are going on to some amazing universities. 2 of them are going off to Canada. Some of them are already in Stellenbosch doing medicine and actuarial. One's going off to Yale. And so our students get around to many different universities around the world, so such as Yale, Oxford, Imperial, LSE, St. Andrews. We've got students in Lausanne, in Switzerland, in the Netherlands. Okay, so our A-level Cambridge program does prepare students for universities all around the world. Right, so just to give you, there's maybe a little bit more detail. Okay, Jana, you can't read the list on the left-hand side, but that's the list of students who have achieved either top in the country or top in the world since 2015, 2016. Right, and there's just a few of them mentioned on the side. Okay, right. So let's have a look at how we implement this Cambridge program here in Somerset College. And this is probably going to be one of the most important pages we're going to be looking at. So we, being an IEB school, we have grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, as you can see in the gray blocks on the left-hand side. Right, we then offer the Cambridge AS and A level parallel to that. So if you're looking at this here, the AS program, you can see we offer parallel or opposite grade 11, and the A level is opposite grade 12. Students who are accepted into the AS level come from our internal grade 10 cohort, or they come from outside our school. So they're either students from international schools, or they come to us from other schools within South Africa, having done either CAPS or an IEB grade 10, or they generally would have done the IGCSE or GCSE coming from international schools. We have accepted students who have come to us before from French systems. Zambia have their own education system. Germany have their own education system. So if somebody has the equivalent of a GCSE grade 10, then we will accept them into the AS level as well. Right. I just need to say at this point that students who come join us as international students who come into the AS level from outside the school have all the same access to sport, to student support, to leadership opportunities. Everything that a current Somerset College student has got has been there since grade 8. Okay. And as I mentioned, the AS students are seen as grade 11 students, so they will be put in mentor groups with the grade 11s, with other grade 11s, and the A-level students will be put in mentor groups with other grade 12s. That means also that as AS is seen as the equivalent to grade 11, when they have a grade 11 camp, we have the AS students join. And in the grade 12, when we have valedictory services and matric dances and all those things, the A-level students are part of that. Right, they're included in that. We do, even though we run the AS and A-level program, parallel and separate to grade 11 and grade 12. In other words, there are no classes which are mixed. So you're either in a Cambridge class or you're in an IEB class. You cannot mix IEB with Cambridge. Right, so if a student chooses to follow the Cambridge program, everything they do from that point on will be Cambridge. And the reason we do that is because universities do not accept mixed qualifications or mixed subjects from different examining bodies. right? So you either do IB or you do Cambridge, right? However, we do try and integrate the Cambridge and the IB students as much as possible, right? So the lesson times are the same, the assembly times are the same. They mix together in mentor groups. They play in the same sport teams. They'll play in the same music ensembles. So we do not run Cambridge as a completely separate entity in Somerset College. The students are completely mixed and integrated together. Having spoken about international students, my cohort for this year in AS, we've got 48 students in the AS cohort this year, and of those 48, nearly half of them are international students. So we have students from Mauritius, Mozambique, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Congo, Kenya, England, America, all over. Okay, so we do have a number of international students who come join us from different countries around the world, and we try and integrate those students coming in as much as possible as well. The nice thing about having so many students coming to AS level from international schools means that we don't have one or two who then feel as if they are the only new students. So we have a big cohort of new students coming in at AS level, which makes it a lot easier to integrate them all together and have, make them part of the school. So it's not one poor little soul coming in and feeling like they're the only odd one out. Okay, right. So there's a huge contingent of international students, which makes such a positive difference in the classroom, because we have so many students from so many different backgrounds and so many different cultures in one classroom, which just makes the Cambridge classes really, really exciting and interesting and beautiful to teach. Right. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing. So if I've got current grade 10 families with me on this call now, what you're doing is looking at the end of grade 10, following AS and then A level, and then the same thing for international students coming in and doing the same thing. So notice the AS and A level is a 2-year course, right? So if we're looking at this little picture here, generally the A level is seen as a 2-year course. So if a student, let's say, decides to take English language as an A level subject, they would normally, in England or countries where they offer just the A level, they would then study English all the way through, and they would write 4 exam papers in the final exam session. So for Cambridge exams, there's generally 4 exam papers which need to be passed to get that qualification in that subject. So Cambridge don't work with averages per se. They work with results in a certain subject. So if you want to get your A level in English, for example, you would study English for 2 years and write 4 exams at the end. And strangely enough, those 4 exams are very simply known as paper 1, 2, 3, and 4. However, because we're doing the international program, we offer it as a staged route, which a number of countries in the Southern Hemisphere do. And what that means is that we write the first 2 papers, paper 1 and paper 2, at the end of the first year, and then we'd write paper 3 and paper 4 at the end of the second year. And that's why it's called the staged route. Now, the exams that they write at the end of the first year count exactly half of the final A-level mark that they get when they finish their paper 3 and paper 4 at the end of the second year. So paper 1 and paper 2, written at the end of the AS year, count the exact same, or they have the same weighting as the paper 3 and paper 4 at the end of the second year. So what that means is that students who want to get an A level in a subject have to work for both years. You can't only work in the second year and try and get the results there. You need to get the results at the end of the first year as well, because they count half of your final. Right. So looking at this, then you'll see that students coming into, I'm talking about now for next year, 2027, you'll come to the AS. Generally, we do 4 or 5 subjects in AS level. That 4 or 5 subjects depends on prior education, where you're coming from. So somebody's got a full set of GCSEs, because that's also Cambridge, can do 4 subjects at AS, but our students who are in grade 10 would normally do 5. But what we do for our students in grade 10 is we allow them to write Afrikaans, which they would have been doing in grade 10, most of them, as a GCSE subject at the end of grade 10, which then ticks off one of those subjects, which means if they do that, they can still only do 4 subjects at AS. However, we do try and encourage students to do 5 subjects at AS because that gives us more options going forward. Now, what I mean by that, that means that when you get to the second year, which is more fondly known as the A2, because remember the A level is the entire 2-year qualification, the second year known as the A2, students would normally take 3 A-level subjects. That is the requirement for universities around the world. 3 A-levels. Okay. However, I do have some students doing 4 A-levels, and I do have some students doing 5 A-levels. Right, 5 A-levels could be considered to be a bit excessive. Right, I have had students do that before, and they've done very well, and they've gone on and done some amazing things. But 3 A-levels is sufficient to get into international universities around the world. 4 A-levels would be what you would do if you're looking to get into something like Oxford or Cambridge. Right, not that they would tell you need 4 A-levels, but generally it helps a little bit. Right, so we run what is known as a stage route. So AS and A2, just to summarize. If a student does 5 subjects in their AS year and they only take 3 in the second year, that means that they drop 2 of them. And those 2 subjects, they would then have an AS qualification. The 3 subjects that they continue with through to the end, provided obviously they get the results, they would then have 3 A-levels. So a student would end up with 3 A-levels, some ASs, and some GCSEs. Okay, and it's those combinations of subjects which will get you into various universities. So, for example, to get into the UK, you need to have 3, possibly 4 A-level subjects. They normally don't worry too much about what you've done prior to that. However, if you want to go to the Netherlands, then you've got to show 6 subjects in total, 3 of them at A-level and 3 others at GCSE. For our local universities, that's a different scenario, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later. Right, so let's have a look what the Cambridge classroom is all about and how it is different or similar to IEB classes. Right, so first of all, as I mentioned just now, Cambridge classes are taught completely separately from IEB classes. We have a fair sprinkling of Cambridge-only teachers, in other words, teachers who teach only Cambridge. Then I've got some teachers who teach across both IEB and Cambridge. So they will teach an IEB class, and then they'll go in and teach a Cambridge class. They'd never teach Cambridge and IEB in one class. All right, okay. So our subjects are taught by trained, experienced teachers. All my Cambridge teachers have gone to have Cambridge training. All right, and they're all in various stages of their training and very experienced. As I say, we've been doing this since 2015. And a large majority of my teachers have actually been doing it with us since 2015. Okay. In Cambridge, students have to demonstrate understanding and core knowledge of a subject, and they need to be able to think critically. Now, you've got to be thinking, but hang on, don't they need to do that for IB? Yes, they do. Okay. The difference is in the examining style. All right. So in Cambridge, the exam papers and things require a lot of understanding from students and discussion, more so than what they have at IEB. It's not that the work is more difficult, well, certainly not at AS level. At A level it is, because that's then beyond matric. Okay, but the way the questions are asked in the exams require more understanding and more being able to discuss what you're talking about rather than just rote knowledge. Okay, so they're asked to construct arguments, evaluate evidence, and the big thing is they need to be able to work independently. So let me just go back and say why they need to be able to work independently. I'm just going to go back to this picture here so we can talk about this. Right, the AS level, as you see it here, that we run parallel to grade 11, in South Africa is the equivalent to grade 12. So a student has got their full complement of subjects at AS level, has essentially achieved a grade 12 pass in South Africa. But that would be at the end of their grade 11 year. Now, what that means is that going off after grade 10 is they're essentially doing grade 11 and grade 12 in 1 year. Right? And the A level, that A2 year, is then beyond grade 12. So that is why our South African universities generally talk about what a student has at AS level. I will talk more about our universities later. Okay, but AS is seen as the equivalent to grade 12, which means the A-level subjects, the subjects they do in the second year, we are starting to push into first year university. Right, so there's a higher cognitive level in the second year, in that A level, but also the first year, that AS level year, is an accelerated program. They're doing 2 years in one. And that's what makes this Cambridge program a little bit more difficult, okay, and certainly not an easier option. Right, and that's very important that people understand that up front. So you've got to be asking yourself then, who would do this? Why would anybody put them through that kind of pressure? Well, we'll chat about that a little bit later. But this is why they need to be able to work independently. Now, independent doesn't mean self-study. It means that they have to be able to work outside of class time. Okay? And that they are given that time, because in our day, we have 9 lessons in Cambridge. Our day starts at 7:30, finishes at 3:15. I'm not including practical time there. So students who are doing physics, chemistry, and biology will have tracks in the afternoons, not every afternoon, but at least one prac every 2 weeks. But because the day finishes at 3:15, that means we have 9 lessons, but they're only doing 5 subjects, which means that somewhere in the middle of the day, they may have what the students sometimes refer to as free lessons, but they are not free lessons. Those are lessons, that's lesson time where they need to be forming study groups with their classmates. They need to be doing research in the computer room, sitting in the library, working, studying, doing their work, doing their reading. Very important, okay? Because this is now starting to prepare them for what's going to happen at university. And during those so-called free lessons, they are not supervised. There's no teacher watching them. So we depend very much on students having the responsibility to work on their own and to know when they need to work harder and when they can take a bit of a break. So there are some times where you'll see the Cambridge students maybe just sitting outside and just relaxing for a few minutes. And there are other times when they are hard at work, forming study groups, talking to classmates, working with each other, helping each other, collaborating, so they can all, as it says, they reach a successful outcome. Okay, and this is what the independent part of it means. In the Cambridge program, a student cannot just walk into a classroom, listen to what is going on, walk out and think that they're going to do well. They have to keep working all the time. I've got a teacher on board here who says they need to live their subjects. So the subjects they choose, they've got to live them. Okay, and that means that you can't just sit in the back of a class and like a wallflower and hope the information's going to soak into you. Right, so we're going to talk a little bit more about that now as well. Right, so doing an international curriculum, obviously students will be encouraged to develop a more international outlook. And the idea is that they become more confident global citizens. Now, why more confident? Because they're actually going up against thousands of students around the world. Okay, so when we get students who are coming top in the world, they are coming top out of thousands and thousands of students. Okay, so you gain a little bit of confidence knowing that that is where you're playing. Okay, that's the range which you're working in. Right, so looking at IB, so the aims of the IB and Somerset College are very similar. And this is why it was relatively easy for me in 2015 to bring the Cambridge program in, because it fitted into the college ethos. Okay, because Somerset College was already thinking along those lines. Okay, so bringing the Cambridge program has fitted quite easily. And as it says here, the difference between the two is that topics are explored to a deeper level. We've also got that accelerated program, which means the volume of work is greater, which requires a lot more dedication and greater responsibility from a student. Okay. As I say, the Cambridge program is an accelerated program compared to the IB. And that's because the AS qualification is seen as the equivalent to a South African matric. So it is not a soft option. Every year I get students saying to me, oh, but it must be easier because we only need to do 4 or 5 subjects as opposed to 7 in IEB. That does not make it a soft option. Okay, right. So students who choose the Cambridge program will be expected to work harder, will be expected to work independently outside of class. So I'm a physics teacher, for example. I teach AS physics. It is not enough for my students to just listen to what's happening in class and work in class. They need to be doing their reading outside of class. They need to be practicing. They need to be working through it. They need to be talking to each other. They need to engage with the subject. And that means that the next time they come into class, they should be able to ask questions about what they've been reading or the videos that they've been watching. Or, they can't just walk into a class, listen to what's going on, walk out and forget about it until the next day. If they do that, then there is no point to them doing Cambridge because they will not get the results that they're going to require. Okay, so it's very important that students realize from day one, they need to start working hard. Okay, and they've got to develop that work ethic. And once they've developed that work ethic, this is what is so amazing about our Cambridge program, is that the students then develop this work ethic and they develop the habits required to achieve at the highest level, which means when they go on to university, they are set and they have everything in place. There are universities in South Africa who actively seek out A-level students because they work hard. They're at the top of the Dean's Merit lists. They finish their degrees in a required length of time. They don't cause any trouble. That's the words from the universities themselves. Okay. And that's because of what the A-level students would have put in place by the time they get to that point. And the thing with it is that they are developing those skills while they're still at school and they have the support of their teachers and their peers and the people around them, rather than trying to develop those skills once they get to university and they're sitting in a lecture theatre of 300, 400 people. Right, so that's what makes the Cambridge program pretty special, to be honest with you. But it's not easy, but it's also not impossible. A student coming into the Cambridge program must just know what they are signing up for and be prepared to work for it. They need to have a goal. They need to know why they are doing this. Okay, and that's very, very important. Especially in the end of the first term, beginning of the second term, that's when I get most of my students going, why? Why did I do this? And the reason that they've chosen needs to be strong enough to pull them through. So I always say with students that what they've got to do, there's 3 things that I need from a Cambridge student. The first one is they need to know why they want to do it. That why is very important. It can't be because their parents want them to do it. It can't be because their friends are doing it. It cannot be because they think it's going to be easy. And then the other one is because they don't have to do Afrikaans all the way through to the end. They think it's going to be nice. Okay, those are not reasons to do it. They must have a strong reason as to why they want to do it. And then they've got to be prepared to work independently and work outside of class and prepare. And they've got to be prepared to engage with what is happening in class. So what I mean by engaging in class, it means taking part in what's happening. In a Cambridge classroom, there's a lot of discussion and a lot of talking and just getting people's input. It's less of being told what's happening and now just go do your work. Okay, there is some of that in IB, there is some of that in CAPS, there is discussion as well in those two, but in Cambridge, a lot of it is about discussion and just making sure the understanding is behind it. And a student who sits at the back of the class and just tries to listen is not going to do as well as somebody who's sitting in the front, offering their opinion, asking questions, trying to give answers, and just being part of what's actually happening in the class, engaging in what's happening. Right. So, question then is, who does join the Cambridge program? Well, students who are looking for more of a challenge at school, and we do have students like that, okay, who want a challenge. Okay, who feel that maybe they're not being challenged by the IEB. I do sometimes get students say to me, well, they're not being challenged by the IEB, but they're only achieving 50% in the IEB. Well, then that's a bit of a problem then sometimes. Okay, so if you're saying you're not being challenged by the IEB, then you should be cracking A's all the way through, surely. Right. Students who join the Cambridge program are also interested in keeping options of international study open. Okay, so we've got a number of students who want to go study internationally. They want to keep the options open, but they may end up studying here. A large percentage of our students stay in South Africa, but they have the options to go overseas. I've had students who have got accepted to universities around the world, but they end up at Stellenbosch, okay, for various reasons. Right, so the Cambridge program does get you into local universities as well as international universities. All right. Students who join the Cambridge program also have an idea of what they want to go do after school. Right, because you're narrowing down your subject choice to only 3 subjects at the end of the A level, you sort of have to have a good idea of what you want to go do because you're narrowing those choices down. Okay. And then other students who join the Cambridge program are students who are currently at other international schools doing Cambridge and they want to continue with it. So students who have been doing the GCSEs, for example, their Cambridge IGCSE or GCSE, and they want to continue with the Cambridge program. Now, I must say at this point that there's a big jump from grade 10 to AS, but there's also a big jump from having done IGCSEs to AS. Right, so some students feel because they've done their GCSE, AS is going to be a breeze. No, it's not. There is still a big jump. The only advantage an IGCSE student would have is that they've got more subjects behind them, which may mean take some pressure off the number of subjects they do at AS. And they may have an idea of how the Cambridge program runs and how the questions are asked. But in terms of the cognitive difficulty of what they are doing, the AS is a step up over and above IGCSE. Okay, and it requires different skills as well. So students who are coming from grade 10 and IGCSE, there's no clear advantage between the two as to how they're going to perform in the AS or an A-level program. Right. The only thing, as I say, is it can affect the number of subjects you do. But as I say, with that Afrikaans IGCSE option that we have, that helps that quite a bit. Right. Why should not follow? I mentioned this just now, but we'll go through it again. So somebody choosing Cambridge, you still have to achieve good results. It's not enough just to say you've done Cambridge. Okay. So you still have to achieve good results to go to tertiary study. So particularly for South African or students going to South African universities, your AS results are seen as your grade 12 results. So you need to be doing very well there. They are seen as the equivalent to grade 12. Once you've got A level, that's different. I'll talk to you now about how our universities regard A level, but that's a completely different thing. Right. So it is an accelerated program, as we've mentioned. And as I've said, some subjects doing a few subjects think it's going to be easier. No, it is not. The other thing I have to mention, for students who suffer from examination anxiety, and there are some people who are so anxious around exams, they're fine with tests and things like that happen during the year, but they struggle with exams. In Cambridge, your final result is based only on your final exam. There is no continuous assessment mark. While we do write exam or tests and assessments and things during the course of the year, and parents will get reports the same as they would normally. They get a term 1 report, term 2, term 3. Okay, we don't do a term 4 report because that is your Cambridge exams. You get a certificate for that. There is those term marks that you write have no bearing on your final result. In the IEB, 25% of your final result is made up of a continuous assessment or a year mark. Right? In Cambridge, there's no such thing. Right. So if you're going to be writing English language at the end of your ASEN, you're writing paper 1 and paper 2, and you struggle with exams or you have examination anxiety, that paper 1 and paper 2, that is it. That's your final mark. Okay. And if you're sick for one of those exams, we can't move exams. Okay. These are international exams. They are written at the same time around the world. Okay. I cannot adjust the timetables to help students who may be ill. Okay, so it's very important that we understand that the examinations that's your final result, and you need to make sure that you're there to write those exams. Okay, and then the last point there that I say that I often get every year, I get students coming and they go, oh, I don't know if I should do the Cambridge program. You know, my friend's doing it and I think maybe, I don't know. If there's any doubt, then generally the answer is don't. Okay, so students choosing to do the Cambridge program, they must know this is what I want to do. And I have that every year. I've got some amazing students who come, and I've also had amazing students who have said, actually, no, it's not for me. Okay, and at this point, I'll tell you, both of my children were at Somerset College, and neither of them did Cambridge. So it's not a must do. Both of my children carried on with the IB, and that's mainly because they didn't want to be taught by their dad, which would have been me. But they've gone on to Stellenbosch University, and they're doing amazing things. So you don't have to do Cambridge. I know there are schools in the country that say if you want to study overseas, you must do Cambridge. That is also not true. There are universities around the world that do accept the IB qualification. Okay. There are universities around the world that don't accept IB. Okay. So, for example, if you're looking to go to the Netherlands or Switzerland or something along those lines, then generally the Cambridge program is recognized. Okay. The IB program is not known, which normally means that you've got to jump through quite a few hoops if you're going to try and get in there. However, Edinburgh, which is a beautiful university, accepts IB without a problem. American universities accept IB without a problem. So there are a number of universities around the world, okay, that will accept IB. So you don't have to do Cambridge. But if you speak to the students who have done Cambridge, it is an amazing ride. It is, because what they learn during their 2 years, not so much about the maths and the physics and the chemistry that they're doing, that obviously comes with, but what they learn about themselves and the skills that they have in place and the habits that they put in place are absolutely awesome. Okay, we have a braai at the beginning of the AS year, and I have dinner with the A-level students on their own at the end of the A-level year. And the difference in those students over that 2-year period is unbelievable. Just the way they think, the way they communicate, and the way they argue their point is just quite something to see the growth. And this is what's so special about the Cambridge program. Okay, right. So what makes a successful Cambridge student? So as I've said this a couple of times now, you need to do this because you have a goal in mind, your goal. Okay, right. It's not for parents to choose the route or the subjects followed. Okay, all right. So parents, I'm not trying to put you out of the picture here, but it's really at the end of the day, the student is the one who's going to be doing the work. They need to make the choice. Right. They need to be prepared to work independently outside the class. As I've said, it does not mean self-study. I know I've said all this before, but I'm going to say it again. All right. They cannot simply walk out of a class and not address the subject matter again until the next class. They need to use all the resources at their fingertips, and there's a lot of it. They need to be engaged in class. You need to offer opinions, discuss their theories, argue with their peers. Okay. And then they have to be able to prioritize, okay, in terms of time. They need to deal with pressure, take responsibility for their studies. So in other words, a Cambridge student cannot sit back and go, well, I don't understand something, but it'll come to me in 2 weeks' time. No, in 2 weeks' time, you're onto 3 chapters down the road. Okay, so if you as a Cambridge student are sitting there and there's something you don't understand, you take responsibility right there and then, and you go to the teachers and you get help. Okay, so they need to work with it straight away. There's no waiting. And because it's an accelerated program, the teachers work quickly through the work to get to the end. Okay, so there's very little time to go back and repeat things over and over. All right, okay, so let's talk about university access, because this is normally one of the biggest questions. So if a student does Cambridge here at Somerset College, they still can go to a South African university. Okay. I don't know if you guys can see the picture in the top right-hand corner, but those 2 boys right in front there, they went to South African universities, both of them, without a problem. Okay, they both went to UCT, as it turns out, and the one on the left did medicine. So the students completing the Cambridge International Qualification can attend South African universities. They do have to get something called matriculation exemption. So matriculation exemption is automatically given to an IEB student because IEB students have to complete 7 subjects. And as a school, we make sure that they cover all the requirements. And because it's a South African curriculum, they automatically get matriculation exemption, provided they get the results, also known as a bachelor's pass. Right. For Cambridge students, because there's so much flexibility within the program, they have to apply for a matriculation exemption certificate. And this is issued by USAF, University of South Africa. Okay, not the United States Air Force. And you need to apply for this separately. However, you don't have to get it before you go to university. You can apply for the matriculation exemption certificate once you're at university. You just need to get it before you graduate. So the universities, so Stellenbosch University is awesome. They actually help students get their matriculation exemption certificates. UCT, not so much. Right, but that's not a problem. It's easily applied for, and it comes through after a couple of weeks. Right, so they do accept students who have attained the necessary grades in 5 subjects, but 4 of those subjects at AS level and 1 at GCSE. Right, so if my grade 10 students, if they write the Afrikaans exam at the end of the grade 10 year, that ticks the box for that 1 GCSE level subject, which means they can do 4 AS level subjects. Okay, the student coming in with GCSEs means they've already got that, and then they can do 4 subjects at AS level. However, I have said just now that we do prefer our students to do 5 subjects at AS level. Okay, and we can talk a little bit more about that now. It depends on the subjects you're doing as well. Right, but now a student who applies to university with AS results is seen as a matric student. There is no difference in the results. So an 80% is an 80%, and a 70 is a 70, and so on and so forth. Cambridge work with symbols. So an A, a B, a C, and the A is 80% and up, and a B is 70%, and a C is 60%. So you would then write English, and you'd get a B for English, and you'd apply with a B, right? You don't apply with an average. But once you've done your A level, students who have completed their A level, because that is above matric, our universities view you favorably. So what does that mean? That means that if you've got A level English and you've achieved a C for A level English, our universities will regard that as an A for university entry. So it bumps up by 2 symbols. So Stellenbosch, which work with symbols, for example, will regard a C as being the equivalent to an A. Okay. And a B will be regarded as an A star, which is 90% and up. And if you get an A at A level, the universities are going to be after you, right? Because that means that you're doing exceptionally well. Right. But that's only at A level, not at AS. There's no conversion. People always talk about this marks conversion thing in Cambridge. There is no conversion at AS levels, only at A level. Right. UCT, which works with a points system, if you get a C for matric, you will get 6 points for UCT entry. If you get a C in Cambridge A level, you'll get 8 points. So they bump it up by 2 points. And 8 points is the same as what you would get for an A. So they also bump it up by 2 symbols. So if you get an A in your A-level subjects for UCT, you will get 10 points for your entrance scores. Okay. And then, as I've said at the bottom there, to receive matriculation exemption in South Africa, a student should normally offer 2 languages, English plus 1 other one. It does not have to be Afrikaans. Okay, so to get matriculation exemption in South Africa, you have to have English language, okay, not literature, but English language, and another subject. And that other subject can be French or German, Portuguese, Spanish, Mandarin. There are a number of other languages. It does not have to be Afrikaans. Right. So here's the stories about matriculation exemption. There are 3 different ways in which a student can get matriculation exemption. Remember, this is required only for South African universities, not international. I'm only talking about local South African universities, UCT, Stellenbosch, Wits, Pretoria, those guys. Just talking about our universities here, those 4 universities that I've mentioned, UCT, Stellenbosch, Wits, Pretoria, Those are 4 universities that have the best understanding of the Cambridge program in South Africa. So when you apply to them with Cambridge marks, they will know what you're applying with. Other universities, such as, and I'm not trying to disrespect any of the other universities, but they get fewer applications. So UWC, for example, Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, University of KZN, they, Potchefstroom as well, they generally do not get as many Cambridge applications, so they don't always understand what they need to do with a student who's applying with Cambridge results. Right. The other universities have international offices. Stellenbosch, for example, has an amazing international office. So if you apply to Stellenbosch with the Cambridge results, they know exactly what you are doing, where you're coming from. And in fact, we have a very good relationship as a school with Stellenbosch University in that regard, and UCT to a degree. Okay. So speaking about that, then you'll see there are 3 different ways. So students, if you look at this one at the bottom here, where it says here 4 subjects at the AS level, this is generally what we aim for first, for students to get 4 AS and 1 GCSE. And then if they don't get that, or they don't qualify for this, for matric exemption, okay, then we can get matric exemption again at A level. So in other words, with 2 subjects at the AS level plus 3 at a minimum of GCSE, or 3 subjects at A level plus a minimum of 1 at GCSE. So there are different ways. And when students come to speak to me about doing the Cambridge program, I interview every family that comes in, and I'll talk to every student and every family and about the matriculation exemption, because it is dependent on the subjects that they choose. Right. So talking about that, we'll get onto that now. This is just the Stellenbosch. I was talking just now how Stellenbosch view the marks. So you'll see an 80% for our universities. Okay, is known as a 7 for South African National Senior Certificate. Is 80 to 100%, and you can see at A level, a C, for example, would then be regarded as 80%. An A at A level would be regarded as 90% for entry, and an A star, which in Cambridge is 90% and up, will be regarded as a 95%. So doing your A level certainly helps you for South African university applications, right? Because once you got your A levels, you're seen as higher than a grade 12 student. But A level is required for international study, except the US. The USA do accept AS level. However, if you do your A level subjects, there are universities, and I'm talking about top universities like Harvard and Yale, who to this day still give credit for students who have done well in their A levels. Okay, so what I'm saying is you can get up to a year's credit in a certain subject depending on your A level results. All right, so these are the subjects that we offer here at Somerset College. English language, English literature. We do offer English literature, but our universities do not accept it as a subject for university exemption. The reason we offer it is because it is a massively powerful subject for international study. So students looking to go study in the UK or the USA, English lit is a hugely powerful subject. Right, then mathematics. So a student in AS will do pure maths and stats, and then in the second year, if they do maths again in the second year, they would then either do the second year pure, and they could choose either stats 2 or mechanics. So the students that choose mechanics are generally those looking to go into engineering, and the people looking to go into financial degrees like actuarial and with accounting and those things, will generally do stats. Then we do physics and chemistry, 2 separate subjects. In the IEB, it's 1 subject, physical sciences. In Cambridge, 2 separate subjects, which tells you that we obviously go a lot deeper into physics and chemistry than what we do in the IEB. Right, so we teach a lot more in physics. There are topics that we cover in physics and chemistry in Cambridge that we don't even see in the IEB. And then there's biology, which is normal, what we call life sciences in IEB, history, computer science, economics, art, music, and then further mathematics. So the further mathematics we only offer in the A levels, only offered in the second year. And that's crazy maths. Okay, anybody who takes further maths needs to have their head read. There's no university in the world that will want further maths, but you really, really, really got to enjoy maths to go do further maths. Okay, so you do further pure maths, further stats, and further mechanics. And the students love it. But wow, okay. Guys who do further maths will fly at university. Right, and then art is offered generally as an A-level only, so it's a 2-year course. We don't do it in 1 year. So we don't do the staged route for art, we only do it for that. Geography is not on the list there, but we are offering geography next year for AS. Okay, so these are the subjects that we offer. Now, a lot of people say, well, why don't we offer any other subjects such as drama or business or any? There are 52 subjects that Cambridge offer. These are the only ones that we offer at Somerset College. And the reason for that is that our Cambridge program is geared around students looking to go on to university. And these are the subjects that are regarded as facilitating subjects for university entry. So business is a subject that Cambridge offers, but it's not seen as a tier 1 subject for international study. Okay, so there's all sorts of weird combinations that work around different countries and what subjects they want. These are the subjects virtually everybody wants. Okay, and will get you into universities getting results in these subjects. Right, I just got to talk about art quickly. If you're looking to go to Europe, there are countries in Europe that do not regard art as being an academic subject. So if you want to go do medicine, for example, and you're doing chemistry and biology and art, they will not accept art as an A-level, and they will make you come back and do some other A-level. Right, so that's just something to bear in mind. All right, art's an amazing subject, but if you're looking to do an academic degree, it does not count as one of your A-levels. Right. I've got a student currently studying in Lausanne who went to Lausanne, tried to get in with maths, biology, and art, and they would not accept her because she's doing mathematical biology course degree, biological maths as it's called, and they made her come back and do A-level chemistry. Right, because they would not accept her art. Right. There's a few subject requirements. I've spoken about the matriculation exemption and all of those things. Okay. To achieve exemption with AS, a candidate must offer AS English language. Okay. So you must offer AS English language if you're applying for exemption with AS subjects. Once you've done your A level, then English at a GCSE level is good enough. So this is where I'm talking mostly to my international students who would have done English at a GCSE, right? But when I talk to you, I'll talk to you one-on-one about that as well. Okay, as I said there, the vast majority of universities accept 3 A levels, but there are some that may want 4. But that 4 is generally to decide between 2 students. Okay. And then the big point here is for local universities. Our universities here in South Africa, if you want to study a BSc, so whether it be a BSc engineering or a BSc maths or whatever, you have to offer both AS physics and AS chemistry together. And the reason for that is that our universities feel that they need to compare Cambridge students with IEB or CAP students, and those students would have done both physics and chemistry as part of physical sciences. So even though we do more physics and more chemistry, our universities still want both, but only in the first year. You don't have to do it to A level. Right, so if a student does just physics, for example, and I can understand somebody doing that because physics is an awesome subject, it's the only one that anybody should really want to do. I was joking because I'm a physics teacher. Then physics on its own is not going to get you into a BSc degree. You have to have chemistry as well. Right, and then this last point is quite interesting. There are local universities that require 6 subjects for certain courses. So those 6 subjects can be any 6 subjects in Cambridge. Generally, we'll have 3 A levels. That means 3 others. So 1 GCSE, 2 ASs, something along those lines. Okay, so UCT, for example, some of their faculties are happy with 5 subjects, others want 6. And in the Netherlands, for example, they always want 6. So if you're a student coming from grade 10, then that means you need to do Afrikaans at the end of grade 10, as well as 5 subjects in your AS year, if those are the doors you want to keep open. But we can also speak about a couple of things around that when we talk one-on-one. This is the beauty of the Cambridge program. It is so flexible, okay, but at the same time makes it very confusing as well. Okay, so we have got options around various things, but the idea is to try and keep as many doors open for our students as possible. Okay, right, so here comes the costs. This is the fun part. All right, so our current Cambridge fee, the fees for 2027 have not been finalized yet, but the fees for this year is 194,000 South African rands. Okay, that includes all exam costs. Everything is included in that except for textbooks and stationery and boarding. So boarding would be added onto that. So those are the costs for this year. So you can sort of extrapolate where we're going to go next year. I can't comment on that at this point because I have no idea. Right, but there's no extra examination costs. There's no extra practical costs or anything along those lines once you've done that. Right, so where to now? Okay, so local students currently in grade 10, if this is what you want to do next year in 2027, if you want to do the Cambridge program, then I've already sent letters out to our local students, but we need to start talking about doing the GCSE Afrikaans exams in October this year. We will be running some lessons in Afrikaans, but not lessons where we teach Afrikaans, but rather lessons where we get the students used to the examination style, because the exams are slightly different in Cambridge than they are in IB. Right? You can't write a Cambridge Afrikaans exam and then try and drop Afrikaans in the IB. That doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't replace anything. Okay, any student now currently in grade 10 who's thinking of doing Cambridge next year, they should be aiming at getting the best possible foundation in their work possible. Right, so you should be aiming for at least 70% in mathematics, at least 70% in physical science, if those are subjects that you're going to be taking forward. Okay, but across the board, you should be looking at setting the strongest possible foundation from which to work next year. Because if there's any gaps in your knowledge this year, it's going to create gaps next year, which means you're automatically going to be behind the curve, which then puts a lot of pressure on students. Right. For international students, you interested in joining us here at Somerset College, of which a number are. I've already signed up a number of international students from Zambia, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. Some amazing students coming in, by the way. If this is what you want to do, then please do make an appointment with me via our admissions department. So if you contact admissions, I'm going to put their email address up now. And we will need an idea of your GC or IGCSE results, or what you've done up until this point. Right. You will remember I said just now that one of the biggest important things for our students is remember why they're doing this. This is a huge big banner that I have in the back of my classroom. Okay, it's important that students know why they're going to do the Cambridge program. All right, because what I tell them is they need to be able to write it on a big piece of paper, stick it on the wall in their room, and when the pressure's on and they start saying, why am I doing this? The reason that they've written on that piece of paper needs to be strong enough to pull them through. Okay, and that's generally where, because my friend did it, is not good enough. Okay, so they really need to know why they're going to do this. And there are some amazing reasons why he did, as I've mentioned before. Right, so that is our admissions email address. Okay, so anybody who's interested in contacting admissions, feel free to do so. There's the admissions address. I'm going to stop the recording at this point and open the questions.